and we are Love to Hate. We're back again with another preview video. This time we have Radioactive Bees from Jose Navas. This is the game that will be hitting Kickstarter on October 13th, and we are going to share our thoughts on it. Radioactive Bees is an abstract strategy game in which you are placing different shapes of hexagonal tiles onto the playing board, trying to stack your tiles in such a way that you leave your bees on the top of the stacks before they get covered by other players. You want your bees to remain visible as long as possible so that you can get increased radioactivity on them to get you the maximum amount of points. Let's take a look at it on the table real quick. All right, I have Radioactive Bees from Jose Navas on the table here. Let me show you guys how this game works, go over it real briefly with you. In Radioactive Bees, players are going to take turns placing their different tiles that they have that come in 3 different shapes and sizes onto this board right here. And the way that works is there's a couple of rules. Your tile that you place has to fully go on the board, so like that. You can't leave it hanging off the board like so. And you have to completely use all the spaces that you can use anyhow on one level before going up to the next level up. So for instance, if the red player went right here, then the black player, using any one of the 3 that they have available, can go anywhere else on the board, but they cannot start stacking up on the top until there are no more places to play on the floor that they're currently on. So it might look something like that. Red player would go again, something like that. And this would just continue back and forth again until there are no more spaces to play, and you would have to then start building upwards. So let's just kind of carry this out a little bit, and it will give you an idea of what I mean by having to go upwards. So again, just taking turns back and forth here. And black might go there, and let's say red goes here, like so. And now we are only left with these single holes right here. And since our tiles that we have come in 3 shapes that are obviously bigger than a single hole, then the black player would go next, and they would have to place on top of a tile. And so the next rule about placing a tile is that when you have to place on top of a previous tile, you have to cover, or at least cover parts of 2 different tiles. So for instance, the black player could not place this tile right here because this is the same shape as below, and it's only covering 1 tile. It would have to extend over to touch at least another tile, 1 other tile. So black could go like that. Now, when you start covering these bee symbols that are on parts of these tiles, that's when points become a factor. You don't want to cover up your own bees because you want to keep your bees visible for as long as possible. And you want to, if your bees are going to get covered, you want to force your opponent to cover your own bees. So the black player would not want to do that at all. They would probably, first, they would probably not play this type of tile. Instead, they would probably play this type of tile and go right here like so, because underneath there were no bees. So not covering up any of the opposing player's bees and not covering up any of their own bees. When you force a player to have to cover one of your bees, so for instance, if the red player went here and covered up the black player's bee, they would give that player 1 point. We'll come back to this here in a second. The points for covering up a bee increase if there are any of these rings on those bees. Again, we'll come back to that here in a second. Play continues on this level again until there's no more places to play on this level, and then we would start another level, and so on and so forth. As you can see, the playing area is going to get smaller and smaller because there will be more places where you can't place a tile. So for instance, right here, there are only 2 spaces available. Again, you can't place right here because we've already passed over that. You can't place a tile that hangs halfway over an empty space like right here. You can't do that. It has to fully be on top of tiles. And so these two would be blocked off now, and we would continue going and play on top of that level and then play on top of the next, and so on and so forth, until you are not able to use any more of your tiles. There's just not any valid places to continue to play, in which case you would pass, and then the other player would keep going until they had to pass, and then that would be the end of the round. You would look from above, and any bees that were still visible would get some of these rings. You would start with the biggest ring that goes around the outside and slot them in these places just like so. They slide in very easily. And you would do that for all the visible bees. Then you would take back all of your tiles, deconstructing the board, and you would repeat the process. You would go through this again, and you would look at the top after everybody could play all the tiles that they could play, going as high up as you can possibly go. And again, any bees that were visible would get rings. Now, if your bees already had a ring on it from the round before, well, then you would place the next size ring and put it in like so, like that. And again, you would continue this over again, and if there were any bees that needed another ring that already had 2 on them, well, then they would get the smallest ring, which would go in like that. Again, repeat the process. And then if there were any bees that were visible that already had 3 rings in them, instead of adding a 4th ring, you would add the radioactive marker here, and it would just sit right in the middle like so, sticking up like that. It's kind of 3D-ish. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. There you go. And that means you have created a radioactive queen bee. And once a player has made 1 or more of these in a round, that would indicate the end of the round, the end of the game. Excuse me. At which point you would count up the number of bees that you have with any of these radioactive markers, and you would give yourself 5 points. Any bees that had 3 rings would get 3. Any bees that had 2 rings would only get 2. Any bees that had only 1 would get 1. Again, you would also get points throughout the course of the game for covering up bees. You get 1 point for covering up, or if another player covers up your bee. If your bee had 1 ring in it, you would get 2 points. If it had 2 rings, it would get 3 points. If it had 4 rings, it would get 5 points. Now, there is no way to cover up a bee with one of these markers because, again, when a bee gets one of these, the game is over. So you can't cover these up. You count up all the points at the end after you give points for rings and such. And the player who has the most points is the winner. One more side note, there is an additional action tile module that you can add to the game to spice it up a little bit. There are 4 of these, and you will deal these out randomly to each player. You'll have 1 for each player. And these tiles let you do special actions throughout the course of the game when you use them. The freezer bees here allow you to cover another player's bees without having to give them any points. The thief bees here allow you to steal an opponent's covered bees points. So if you place this on top of another player's bees, you get to steal the points that would have been awarded to them. The uploader allows you to add 1 ring to the covered bees. You don't get points for the covered bees, you just get to add a ring to it. So you would use this on your own bees, covering them up. And then lastly, the downloader allows you to take rings off of another player's bees. So you put this on top of another player's bees that have rings, and you would take 1 ring off of each of those bees. So that's how these action tiles work, and that is Radioactive Bees. All right, so there you have it. We're going to share our thoughts real quick on the game. I'll go first. I really enjoy Radioactive Bees. I'm not one who is too far into abstract games. I very much enjoy games that have a lot of theming to go with them, a lot of look to go with them, and Radioactive Bees really surprised me. The gameplay here is very strong. Takes a lot of thought into thinking about what you want to do with your turn, where you want to place your tiles, which tiles you even want to use. At first, I thought I just want to try and spread out my tiles as much as possible. But that's not the best gameplay necessarily. You want to think strategically about blocking off certain spaces and forcing your opponent to have to play tiles that you know they don't want to play, leaving yourself with better opportunities for scoring points. It's one that you have to think certain turns ahead in order to do the best you can on it. And it's also a game in which I did not do very well in. Sam definitely did better than I did. And so there's a good feeling about that, you know what? This isn't one that I'm strong in. I want to try to play this and get better at it. I really enjoyed Radioactive Bees. What did you think about it, Sam?
I liked it. Unlike Lance, I do enjoy abstract games. That's my genre of games. And at first, when we first started playing this game, I actually thought it was a little easy. The very first time we're putting
straightforward and maybe simple.
Yeah, but as we went along, I realized no, this isn't as easy as it looks. There is a lot more strategy to it than meets the eye. I think as a non-gamer, games with too much of a theme tend to be overwhelming to me. There is a theme with this one, but it's, not so much that you can't get past it and play the game.
The theme is definitely built into the game with this. A lot of times abstract games don't have a theme to it. This one has it, and the gameplay mechanics work well with it.
Yeah.
And trying to have your bees be at the top of the beehive and getting the most radioactivity.
Yeah, so. And it's one that I wanted to play over and over again for sure, because you figure out that strategy, and if you mess your strategy up even on the first or the second level, then you kind of, it's hard to get caught back up. So you figure out your strategy the higher you get, and you want to start over and do it again and work that strategy from the beginning.
Yeah, I enjoy that aspect of starting over throughout the course of the game as well, because there's definite times where you get halfway through it and you start to, or at least in my case, you start to realize, oh, I've really screwed up.
Yeah.
But guess what? You get to start over and then try something different the next round. And you do that over and over again, and sometimes you start to figure out, okay, yes, this is starting to work for me, and I'm going to keep going with this, and then your opponent figures that out, what you're trying to do, and then they switch something up, and it causes you to have to rethink. It's kind of a going back and forth, kind of like maybe in a sports game of sorts. You react to what the other team is doing and having to switch your game plan up.
And I have to tell you, I really thought that these little rings
radioactive
were
rings,
very satisfying.
Yeah,
I guess putting them in there, and then it's just a very unique concept, and getting the next one to fit inside there, it's very unique.
Yeah, Sam, I think I agree with you about the components to this game. Really unique. I think the tiles, the way they're different shaped, play very well into the strategy of this game. Having to know how many of each different type of shape that you have left and where you can place them plays a big factor into the gameplay. Stretches your thinking as far as knowing when to play which shape in which spaces and when not to is a big factor in this game. And you're right, these rings are just really satisfying, putting them in there, watching them interlock, going further and further to the middle, getting yourself a queen radioactive bee. It's just a lot of fun. It's something that's satisfying. So, Sam, is Radioactive Bees a game that you feel like bridges the gap between gamers and non-gamers?
I think so. I think with any non-gamer, I personally would recommend abstract games, because most everyone has done a puzzle before, and it just kind of stretches that one step at a time to something like this. It is like a puzzle, but so much more fun.
Yeah.
So I definitely recommend abstract games, and this one is one of the more fun ones that I've played.
Yeah, I agree with that. Abstract games tend not to be overcomplicated. They tend not to let the theme get in the way of the gameplay. And Radioactive Bees is a great abstract strategy game. And I have to agree with Sam. I think this is one that works well with non-gamers. I think you're going to find that a lot of people enjoy the game mechanics and the satisfying nature of stacking these tiles on top of each other and putting these rings in the tiles. So, I think we would definitely recommend Radioactive Bees. As we mentioned at the top of the video, this is hitting Kickstarter on October 13th. We will put a link to the Kickstarter campaign in the description of this video, so please click that link if you feel like Radioactive Bees might be a game that you need in your collection. All right, I'm Lance.
I'm Sam.
And we are Love to Hate. We bridge the gap between gamers and non-gamers, and we feel like Radioactive Bees might be a game that can do that for you. Until next time, we're Love to Hate, and we'll catch you next time.